Hi guys. So I want to talk a little bit about how stories are put together. Specifically, let's talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'm not going to show any footage from the movie here. Famously, Indiana Jones is a very determined person, and he sets out to rescue the Ark of the Covenant, or dig it up, or whatever. He's going to bring it back to make sure that Hitler doesn't get his hands on it. So the first act of the movie is him getting everything together and getting over there and looking. And then the second act, of course, is him looking for it and finding it. And then and along the way we get all these different action pieces. And then finally we get several large action set pieces. And then the movie's over because he wins. Because why would we watch the movie if he wasn't going to win? We experience this as a character driven story, but when you look at how it was made, you wonder what makes it a character driven story. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Character driven stories.
That's the spirit!
Before we go any further, make sure to click like and subscribe. That way you'll get to see more content like this. Also, to help other people find this content. You can also join my Patreon. There'll be links down below. And a reminder at the end of the video. For now, enjoy the rest of the video. Now, the way Raiders of the Lost Ark was written originally, famously, after one of the Star Wars movies, trying to remember which one, might have been the first one, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, who were buddies, were in Hawaii, and there was some third person there. I don't remember his name. I think it was like the screenwriter. And so they're all sitting there, and they dreamed up the character of Indiana Jones, and they started putting together this movie. And the way they put it together is they came up with several large action set pieces they wanted to have, and a bunch of smaller little action pieces they wanted to have. And then they put this character together, and they turned it all over to the screenwriter. And the screenwriter took it, and he chained everything together with the story in a way that makes sense for Indiana Jones to be doing each thing he does along the way. For example, after he gets the Ark, puts it on the ship, and then the German sub shows up, they take the Ark, they also take Marion. Now, at this point, it would be unbelievable if Indy went and did what he did going after the Ark, but we don't get that last set piece without it. So in order to get that, Indy needs another reason, and so of course he goes to save Marion, which is in character. So the screenwriter took all these action set pieces and he kind of strung them together in a story that made sense. And a lot of the ones they came up with originally didn't make it into the first movie, and they ended up making it into the second movie. The sequence in the mines, the sequence on the bridge, those were both originally dreamed up for the first movie. And in the third movie, that's that part where they're in the tunnel and the plane knocks his wings off and goes sliding past them. That was also dreamed up for the first movie. Didn't make it in the second movie either. So they put it in the third movie. Now, when you watch, say, a modern Marvel movie, one of the issues that I have, this is one of the reasons I quit watching Marvel movies, to be honest, is because they're still making the movie the same way, but they're chaining it together badly. So they give you a bunch of really wonderful action set pieces that are strung together with a very thin plot, and the characters are sometimes doing things that don't make any sense. And in a lot of these movies, not just the Marvel movies, I'm mostly talking hearsay, of course, because I haven't actually seen most of them. I gave up after, I think it was the Fantastic Four. Now it's Iron Man. So anyway, there are some other, action blockbusters where at some point the characters do something that not only doesn't make any sense, but there's no reason. There's no reason whatsoever. So what's separate? So they're made the same way as Raiders of the Lost Ark, but what separates them? Why is Raiders of the Lost Ark a character-driven story and these other stories are not? So when I don't really have a direct answer, if I did, it wouldn't be a video. I would just post or do a short or something. So when I was writing The Fool's Tale, I had previously, a few years before that, or the year before that, or whatever, I was working on a National Novel Writing Month novel. I'll be calling them nano novels in the future. And I had put together this pirate crew on a ship, and I liked all these characters. I didn't really write much of that story. So I sat down to write The Fool's Tale. One of the rules for National Novel Writing Month is that it has to be a new story. You can't take something you already started, add 50,000 words to it. That doesn't count. It has to be a new story, so I had to start a new story. Now, you can take ideas and characters you were previously working with and put them in your new story. You can do that. But I didn't start out that way. I started out, I had a vague idea of the plot. A lot of the meandering that happens early in the book is because I hadn't really put together the story in my head yet. And the reason it's still there is because after I did put the story together, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So when you write a story where you only have a vague idea of what the story is, you have to really focus on the characters, and you're doing whatever the character is doing, whatever makes sense. And they're finding out whatever information you dream up with in the moment while you're writing it. At some point, I realized two things. My story was more complicated than I could keep track of, the way I was writing it. And two, I wanted the pirates in the story. So I stopped and I did a plot outline. And I thoroughly plotted the whole thing. I don't have that outline anymore because I don't need it anymore. But I can tell you, if you read this book, maybe you noticed this. Some of my pre-readers noticed it. There's stuff happening that we don't see because the whole story is told from Cecil's point of view. So, Mary's doing stuff and the villains are doing stuff and so forth. And we don't see any of it, but we do see the effects. We see Cecil getting stalked. We see, the cops come after him. And of course, the thing that starts off the third act, you have to read the book. I mean, it's the kind of book where if I tell you what's actually happening, it's spoilers. It's all spoilers. I can't really tell you anything about it. When I reached the point where I had plotted everything out, then the question was, how do I get the character from here to here in a way that makes sense? How does he find out the information? How does he find out that the information is over there to begin with, and he has to go there and get it? So when Raiders of the Lost Ark was put together, when you know how it's put together and then you watch the movie, you can see that the character of Indiana Jones was created to make that plot stick together. So he is determined, he never gives up, because if he did give up, none of these action set pieces would make sense. They wouldn't shoot him. He has to be determined. He has to be that kind of hero. You see a similar thing in Die Hard with Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis wasn't originally the one they wanted. But anyway, they have these things they want to do. They want him walking on the broken glass, and they want him crawling through the air ducts, and they want him to rappel down off the roof. All the things that he does in that movie. They want to blow up the top of the skyscraper at the end of the movie. If John McClane was the kind of character that would cut his losses, then he wouldn't have finished the movie. He would have retreated and let the cops handle it. But he wasn't willing to cut his losses. He had to continue. And it wouldn't have been as good of a story, of course. But the reason he's that kind of character is because they strung together all these pieces and they had to link them together somehow. The easiest way to do that is character just doesn't give up. Now, in a movie, a lot of the characterization is handled by the actors. In a book, the characterization is handled by you, the reader. And I'll be honest, if you read the character wrong, you're going to get something wrong. And as a reader, I've made this mistake before. It took me a while to get my head wrapped around the Shannara books. The first three. The others, I mean, he was a much better writer after he wrote The Wish Song. And one of the reasons I had such a hard time getting my head wrapped around it was because the prose doesn't tell you what the character's like. The dialogue does, but if you read the dialogue in the wrong tone of voice and you emphasize the wrong words, you don't get the character as he was written. You don't necessarily get a character that even makes sense in the story. But in a movie, you put that in the hands of the actor, and the actor makes it all make sense for you. We really don't give actors enough credit for what they do, while at the same time we over-celebrate them. Anyway. But when you go back to, some older media, I was thinking about Romeo and Juliet, which really, we need to make a modern version of that where they're actual middle schoolers, because that's the kind of dumbass drama you can only get out of middle schoolers. If Romeo and Juliet were 20, that play doesn't make sense.
That's the spirit!
Now, Shakespeare is famous for having believable characters, while at the same time, with our modern points of view, the characters don't look that believable. They look kind of ridiculous. It took Mel Gibson to make Hamlet make any damn sense, although I'm pretty sure that Patrick Stewart could have. So you're looking at Romeo and Juliet, and you see them doing some boneheaded stuff that doesn't actually make sense. I don't understand how contemporary audiences would have received that play, because when I watch it or when I read it, I'm like, what the hell are they thinking? But you take Roxanne, the play that was based on, I don't remember the name of it, French play, the guy with the big nose. Obviously Roxanne had the guy with the big nose too. The original play, even when presented, I've seen a black and white version of it made. I think it was made for PBS. It might have been a feature film, but I've seen a Cyrano de Bergerac, that's what it's called. I've seen a black and white version of it that was made as a movie, in modern times, and it was fantastic. They kept all the dialogue the same. I even went and read the play to see if they kept it all the same, and they did. Well choreographed, the sword fights are great. And then they made Roxanne, where they told a modern story. It's still the same story. And if you look at, let's say that Star Trek DS9 episode, looking for Parmak in all the wrong places. I believe that's the episode that is Cyrano de Bergerac, except you got Worf. But I'm pretty sure the process involved in making both Cyrano de Bergerac, the writing process, Cyrano de Bergerac and Romeo and Juliet was essentially character driven. Like they knew how they wanted it to end. They had an idea of certain points they wanted to hit, and then they just sat and wrote. They didn't type, they wrote, and then edited and revised until they finally had, whatever they had. And compared to, one of our modern blockbusters, suddenly, the process is completely different. But in a perfect world, the end result would be the same. You're watching these characters do these things. It's really interesting, it's really exciting, and then you're glued to the edge of your seat. And it's different from a movie that's more like a character study. Like Forrest Gump is really more, we're watching Forrest Gump live his life. I think it's called Castaway, the Tom Hanks movie with the basketball as a co-star, soccer ball, whatever it was. Again, that's all about the character. The story is second place to the character, but a character-driven story, you have to put the two together somehow. I don't really have a point. I just wanted to talk about character-driven stories and how different ways you can put them together. The Detective Lindsay story, you can buy it on Amazon. Both that and The Fool's Tale, you can get on Amazon. So the Detective Lindsay story, it's much shorter. It's around 40,000 words, ebook only. That one I knew where I wanted to start, and I had a vague idea where I wanted to end. And the story just kind of assembled itself while I was writing Detective Lindsay, going through the motions of investigating. I'm working on the second story in the series. I'll finish it sooner or later. That was a little more complicated. That one I need to string together like a blockbuster. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about, character-driven stories. Bye, guys. Thank you for watching the video. If you made it this far, you definitely need a like and subscribe. Ring the bell if you want to get notifications. And don't forget to join my Patreon. At some point, when people join my Patreon, this wall is going to be filled with names. Obviously, there aren't any right now. YouTube might be suggesting some videos here for you to watch. You could also do that. Have a nice day.